my name is Emma and I am from ChargeWorks. And we are an electric vehicle consultancy based in Devon, in Newton Abbot, in fact. Yeah, nice to see, like I said, some familiar faces, because obviously we meet counsellors in our day-to-day work, and also in a lot of the things that you might be doing outside of working with your councils as well. So at ChargeWorks, we are Emma and Tom, and we live and work in Devon. Our children go to school in Devon. We have a walk along a main road to take our children to school. So their air quality locally and the transport locally and their energy in Devon is really important to us. I've been a sustainability consultant for several years, having done a master's in strategic leadership towards sustainability, and followed that up with more studies on sustainable transport systems. And Tom has been working in solar PV for quite a long time. He is a solar PV engineer, and we have our family business and work together supporting individuals, businesses and communities with their shifts to electric vehicles and renewable energy. And this is what we do at ChargeWorks. We work together with you to accelerate the transition towards electric transport by primarily supporting and advising on the integration of electric vehicles, from charging to driving, and that's helping you, your community and your organisation learn and feel empowered to embrace change. And I've got this picture of two people holding hands here because we feel this real need for hand holding with these kind of transitions. And I mean that in the least patronising sense possible. It's where change can feel quite daunting, I think, especially with electric vehicles. People seem to feel quite intimidated by that transition at the moment. We are in the very early stage of taking it up, so that's quite understandable. The ways in which we do that are through events like this, online and virtual events, bespoke consultations for individual households and also organisations. We provide an employee benefit package where we arrange and deliver consultations to individual employees for their own shift to electric vehicles, or their own designs for solar on their properties. So quite wide ranging and very bespoke as well. We can do workshops to help people learn about electric vehicles and how they work, and how to charge them. We can provide support for funding applications. I know there was a question on the Jamboard about funding, and we can definitely, if whoever posted those wants to ping me an email, if I don't have time to get into them today, then we can definitely, I can direct you to some funds for specific projects. Feasibility studies, so we can provide councils, organisations, individuals even, but mostly it's at a business sense of feasibility studies for what chargers they can put at their properties and or at their premises, or whether or not there are certain vehicles within their fleet that they can switch to electric. So, are you ready to go electric, and how can you do it? And that might not even be a feasibility study that leads to a change now, but just prepares an organisation for switching in the future when it perhaps does become more economically viable, or wherever that tipping point is for them. So just want to clarify before I move on that we don't consult on hybrid vehicles at all. It's purely battery electric. So that's where we focus our attentions. And speaking of events, this was a recent event that we were invited by Action on Climate in Teambridge to deliver in Newton Abbot for the Great Big Green Week. And it was really brilliant to come to this after a year of having run ChargeWorks, because we'd all gone online. And that wasn't the reason that we set up ChargeWorks in the beginning, because we really saw value in that face-to-face, peer-to-peer approach. So it was a real delight to do this face-to-face and bring a group of local electric vehicle drivers to the centre of Newton Abbot to showcase the benefits of electric cars to around 800 people who came through town that day. And for those of you who know Newton Abbot, you'll know that this is quite a busy pedestrian area on a busy shopping Saturday. So that was really lovely to have that opportunity to do that. So I strongly recommend, if you get the chance in the future, to be able to do that or something similar. And we can support you with planning those kinds of events as well. So when we're looking at the benefits of electric vehicles, I like to think of these in this nested interdependencies model. And it shows where you sit or your actions or your council's actions sit in wider society and within the environment as a whole. And each sphere influences the others. And there are some examples where there's been a shift to a focus in electric vehicles for some councils, which has helped across a wider range of these spheres than was predicted. And here are some examples. So the one on the top left, this is a community-owned charge point that was installed by Charge My Street. And you know, charge points don't sound very exciting, do they? They don't sound like the kind of reason you'd get a community together and celebrate. But that's exactly what this became. And it's Charge My Street is a community benefit society that helped this council. I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, Broughton in fairness, to supported them to raise money through a community share offer to install their own charger. So it's actually owned by the community. And they found that really boosted community cohesion and raised awareness of electric vehicles. And that obviously took the cost off of the council's shoulders as well, which is really great. And on the right of that, you'll see a sign which a resident made up in Oxford. And this was just any old EV driver that had a challenge of not being able to charge their car outside their house because they didn't have any off-street parking. So he took part in Oxford City Council's Go Ultra Low on-street charging trial. And he had this sign made up to share what he was doing with his neighbours. And what they had were pavement gullies where the cables would go in for charging. And he noted that his neighbours were really supportive and receptive. And he initially would have been concerned about, you know, how that would have gone, taking up a space on the street that's not demarcated in any way for EVs. But he found that the local community was very supportive and receptive, and that trial's now being rolled out to other councils as well. So if that's a challenge that you have in your community, I recommend looking up the Oxford City Council write-up for that. And if you want, at the end, Harry, I can send through some links to some of these. And at the bottom there, so very bold and brave, in my opinion, Hampshire County Council, taking a stance on sharing how they think this should be tackled, and also how it shouldn't be tackled. So the challenge of charging where you can't park outside your house with off-street parking. And they are promoting the use of cable protectors to go across pavements. And for me, this really highlights that electric vehicles are becoming increasingly a part of our transport landscape, electric cars in this specific instance, and it can't really be shied away from anymore. You know, if you don't have a policy or a trial in place or a plan for installing chargers, people will find ways to work around it, and it might not be the ways that your community want or can best adapt. So definitely look into a variety of different options and see if there's something out there that already suits your community. So what are the benefits of getting involved in promoting electric vehicles and EV charging? And again, back to the nested interdependencies model, I'll just let you have a read very briefly of this while I take a sip of water. And for me, I really like some of the unexpected benefits that you may not realise as a council, if you install chargers, you can also get an income from charging. If you're pricing your charging correctly, you're future-proofing car parks by installing chargers. You can facilitate charging for your council vehicles or other council vehicles or council staff and volunteers. And that's obviously if you have premises to locate charge points. But by promoting electric vehicles in general, you'll help to keep your community on the map, because as the number of people driving electric vehicles increases, and it is increasing dramatically, you'll find that if you haven't promoted electric vehicles in your community, that your town or your parish may not be quite as EV friendly. And so there might be an impact on the footfall. People might prefer to go and park and charge and then shop where they can. And in the example with Charge My Street, that is an example I like, which really brings the community together around EV charging as well. And if anybody wants to pick up on any of these points at the end, then feel free to ask me a bit more. But then there's obviously the wider societal and environmental benefits of reducing CO2 emissions through the life of an electric vehicle versus a diesel or petrol equivalent. Helping to balance the national grid, so cars can charge at times of kind of peak renewables on the grid, and dial down the charging when there's too much demand. So lots and lots of different benefits and reasons to get involved and get your community more involved with electric vehicles. And what you'll find, the more you do this, the more you'll hear these questions. How fast does it charge? I get that all the time. I don't know if any of you out there are electric vehicle drivers, but we get these questions a lot. How fast does it charge? How much does it cost? How far does it go? And these questions stem from an understanding of how to refuel a car with petrol or diesel. And to answer them for an electric car, as soon as you're driving one, you realise that the answer is, it depends. And on the face of it, the best way for me to describe it is it's as simple as ABC. So that's always be charging. Now, you wouldn't be doing that with a petrol or diesel car, constantly refueling, constantly having it plugged in wherever it's parked. But that really is a key point to understanding electric vehicles. So if you're wanting to be a champion in your community for promoting electric vehicles and you don't yet drive one and necessarily understand the challenges around charging, if you think of this ABC, that could help you to frame what it's like to be an electric car driver. Always be charging means always be charging, whether you're at home, if you've got a home charge point, at work, so encourage employers to install chargers, visiting family, going to the gym, stopping for a coffee, at services, at a gig, out for dinner. It's a really helpful way to remember what EV drivers may need in terms of their kind of charging experience and help you work out where to put chargers. I noticed there was a question on the Jamboard about speeds of chargers. And I really like what Co-Charger have developed in terms of base, route and destination charging. Just give you a minute to read through that one. So what this recognises is that cars are stationary for a really long period of time, up to 97% of the time they're actually stationary. And so making most of charging wherever cars are parked and whenever they're parked is what can make EV driving actually really convenient. So this is something to keep in mind in terms of a distribution of chargers. And for some reason right now, rapid chargers are very sexy. People love fast chargers for cars. Even in car parks where you're expected to be parked for hours, or at hotels where you're expected to be sleeping all night. Doesn't quite make sense to me, and doesn't make sense to a lot of EV drivers as well, from what we've gleaned from the EV community. So it's worth thinking about what kind of chargers you're putting in different places if you are promoting EV infrastructure, or if you're commenting on planning for chargers as well. Perhaps some more base charging for your community is important. So those would be slower chargers or destination chargers if you have places where people really like to visit and park for several hours. And route charging really should literally just be that fast charging that just keeps you going on your route, usually off main sort of trunk roads. So yes, I like Co-Charger's approach to the modelling this, and I encourage anybody who hasn't yet to look at a bit more into Co-Charger if you don't know about them already. They're a community charge point sharing company. And here is a bit more about the charging infrastructure, the number of public charge points that there are at the moment, and the increase that there's been over the last 5 years. And this is roughly in line with the uptake of electric cars, and figures suggest, since we're still very much in the early adopter phase, this is going to skyrocket. So if you are installing or you are commenting on plans to install charge points, then think about the numbers of them quite seriously. 1 or 2 charge points isn't normally enough now in one location. They're often busy, or if they're not properly maintained or properly managed, then it's definitely worth installing more to ensure that isn't a problem for EV drivers, and which has a knock-on effect on the uptake of electric vehicles. And if reduced carbon emissions and not missing out on the EV revolution isn't a good enough reason to get on board with electric vehicles, I'm going to share the next couple of slides as another stick that I find often hits home to people. And it's a societal benefit, which is also a societal risk for not switching to electric vehicles. Now, you know that battery electric vehicles have no tailpipe emissions, unlike petrol or diesel cars, which emit pollutants. And one of these harmful pollutants is nitrogen dioxide, and that's responsible for over 50,000 premature deaths per year in Europe. It was ruled that it caused the death of this girl, Ella Adu Kisi-Debra, who was a 9-year-old asthma sufferer living in London. And overall, the estimated cost, and this is an underestimate, to the NHS and social care in terms of emissions from tailpipes, is estimated to be £1.5 billion by 2025 and 5.1 by 2035. And that increases to as much as £9.4 billion when you include links to diseases where there's less robust of a link at this stage. But obviously there's plenty of research into these, and this was a really leading case. I like this poster campaign in London, always caught my eye because particulate emissions can often be very invisible. So think about areas where you walk or cycle outside schools along main roads, and think about what your community might look like if those cars were electric and there were fewer cars as well. And it's really important to consider to not only promote active and public transport, which are super important in terms of reducing emissions and the carbon and sustainability challenges generally, but we're in a rural area here. People aren't going to just jump out of their cars, and it's important for people to travel around a rural area in their car. So don't take the focus away from cars completely, would be my advice, because people do want to stay in their cars, and shifting to an electric vehicle can be a really good way for people to support reducing these emissions from engines. And just as I'm coming to an end, I wanted to talk about some of the barriers that people see for supporting their community to switch to electric vehicles, but they're not barriers, they're opportunities. And these are often around myths and misinformation. So don't let myths and misinformation be peddled, please. Get out there, myth bust, talk to people, learn about electric vehicles. If you want to learn more about electric vehicles, you don't know how to start, come and ask us. One of the barriers is obviously the cost and affordability of EVs. And I can't challenge that one too much. They do have a very high cost at the moment. Somebody commented on the jam boards that the cost they thought was lower, but actually the cost to develop a battery is very, very high. So they are still quite expensive, but the total cost of ownership when you include fuel is lower than a standard petrol or diesel vehicle, almost always when you run the calculations. Some of the barriers are also a lack of understanding around energy, concerns over redundancy of technology. One of the things that needs to be done is to think about the infrastructure in advance. So put in ducting, underlaying car parks and things like that. Don't let new buildings or foundations be laid without thinking about where electric vehicle cabling may go. Link in with active travel and public transport. So think about, putting chargers where you want people to park so that they can then actively travel that last mile, or public transport the last mile. Don't let the rurality, if that's a word, rurality of Devon stop you bringing in charging infrastructure. Yeah, we're not London, but we do have some big cities and we do have air quality issues. Please don't say that you're concerned that cows will walk through the car park and destroy electric vehicle chargers. We've heard that one. Think about where you can locate them so that's not a problem. And think very carefully about the maintenance and management on an ongoing basis for electric vehicle chargers. And while charging and parking are super important, like I said, don't underestimate commenting and planning and developments, arranging events like we did in Newton Abbot, supporting people to switch to affordable energy so that they can, if they can charge at home, they can charge their car as cheaply and as low carbon as possible. There are some councils who have also supported staff shifting to electric vehicles through salary sacrifice schemes, so that's another option. And use your voice to ask, to inquire, and just keep on asking. If you think something needs doing, keep pushing, because it takes a lot of us from a lot of different angles to get these things done. Yes, so thank you very much. I've run a little over, apologies, Harry. There are my contact details if anybody's got any follow-up questions, but yeah, happy to take some questions now.
Oh, beautiful, thank you, Emma. Yeah, so we've probably got time for 5 minutes of questions or something like that. So there was loads in the chat. I don't imagine we'll be able to, some of these are unanswerable as well at this stage, maybe, but Chris, you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks very much. That was fascinating, Emma. I've just bought an electric car, actually. It hasn't arrived yet, but it arrives, I think, on Friday or Monday. So everything is new to me. But I'm just querying your ABC thing, because one of the things that I'm buying a Nissan Leaf. One of the things that the Nissan chap said to me was that it's a good idea not to charge your battery too frequently, because a bit like phone batteries, if you actually are forever charging them, the life of the battery is reduced. So his advice was allow your battery to run down to a reasonable level, like you should your mobile phone, and that will extend your battery life. Is that true, or is that? Well, could you comment on that, please?
Check your manual. Your mobile phone and your car battery are very different. Don't compare it to a mobile phone. The value of the battery in your car is incredibly high. All those rare minerals, rare materials. There's a lot of advice around there about protecting the battery, and it isn't all necessarily correct. Always be charging refers more to the concept of being able to plug in where you can, because you might be driving 50 miles somewhere and then wanting to be able to charge slowly while you're shopping or eating or out with friends. And it's important to have the opportunity to be able to do that. And you can also put a limit on your car in terms of charging, so it doesn't go to 100%, which is the important part of charging. I wouldn't take everything that that a lot of dealers say as gospel in terms of electric car sales. I'd check your manual, and there'll be a point at which it's best to keep your car charged up to. And it's not necessarily about the number of times it's plugged in, it's about the charge level at which it stays. I'm not sure that answers your question.
I'm going to pick up on a comment from John in the chat, just to bring it around the actions for community as a whole. John's put, can you develop a plan for a parish to identify the number of curbside car park chargers and timescale and cost to install? Now, I found it really fascinating what you said, Emma, about doing a feasibility study, even if it's not feasible at this stage, is still something you mentioned. So I just wonder if you could give in some insight into some approaches towards planning, identifying spots, issues like that.
Definitely, yeah. Well, there are lots of different ways that you can identify where EV chargers should be, and a start would be speak to EV drivers in your community, because there'll be reasons why that they've made the shift, as opposed to those that haven't yet. And we can definitely help people and communities look into their geographical space, where people live, and how the types of distances that people are willing to travel to use a community or a curbside charger or a charger in the car park. That is all information that we have available, and that we can support people to write plans towards.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So speak further about that. So I'll open it up. If there are other questions that people would like to ask, one or two more questions, you can ask Emma.
Well, I was asking on the chat line there, when I talk to a lot of people about electric cars, I haven't got one. There's the reasons. Somebody who actually is a car dealer said hybrids are a waste of time. So from a point of view of promoting electric in its own uniform way, rather than, is a way of saying hybrids aren't as good, so electric is better. But then the other thing that comes along with electrical vehicles tends to be, it's a bit too early for the battery technology. And as we've all seen, even like you mentioned, mobile phone batteries, etc., there's a lot to be developed in electric batteries, and people are worried about buying a car and then a new type of battery comes out, which means that car probably won't be able to house it, so they'll have to change their car anyway. So I was just trying to get a feel for where are we with the battery technology now? Is there anything else coming along in the future? And have you got any comment about hybrids?
Yes, with battery technology, we're always moving forward. There's a lot coming in the future, and there's a lot that's come behind. There are a lot of 5-year-old battery electric vehicles, 6-year-old, 8-year-old ones that are still ticking along fine, doing a great job, going onto the second-hand, third-hand market. So don't worry about what's this part of the misinformation that we hear going around is that batteries need replacing every 5 years. And battery manufacturers themselves and car manufacturers set up programs for bringing batteries back after a certain number of years, and they've axed those programs primarily because they're not bringing the batteries back because they're still doing a great job in cars. So that's one of the main things that I would like to highlight, and I can point to some examples with those if need be. But battery technology is moving forward very rapidly, but that is absolutely no reason not to have an electric car today, because we support people to make choices to find the car that meets their needs now, with a car that's available now. And if there isn't a car to meet your needs now, then stay with an electric car to meet your needs now, then stay with a petrol or diesel car for now. I mentioned early on that we don't promote or support hybrid switches for a range of reasons. But yeah, I'm not sure that answers your question, but hopefully does in part.
Thank you, Emma. That's really helpful. That point about misinformation, and you mentioned that earlier as well. It's really helpful. I think one of the questions Sophie's not asked before, and her hand's up, so I'll go to her.
Hi, Emma. There's a lot of stuff in the news at the moment about the sourcing of materials for electric cars, and of course we don't want to replace one environmental and social catastrophe with another one, so that is something that needs to be addressed. But is there any implication of that in the charging infrastructure itself when you're looking to set up a charging point? What kind of rare minerals are involved in that, and can you have any conversation with the people who are putting it in? Where's the sourcing? What's the supply chain?
Oh, that's a really good question, Sophie. I can't answer it in great detail because there's still a lot of I've started looking into it recently because something came to my attention with regards to some solar panel manufacturers. So I started looking into where there might be crossover with electric vehicle charge points. There are some brands that do better than others in terms of where they do most of their manufacturing in the world. But I'd love to see something like the Fairphone 4 of electric vehicle charge points. But yeah, it takes a little bit of research, but that's definitely criteria that we can bring in when helping communities or organizations source their charge points. It is something that that we are asked about, renewable energy in general and cars too, which manufacturers are doing better on certain aspects. And my short answer is I don't know which ones are doing better with charge points, but I'll find out and get back to you.
Thank you.